Hello and welcome to another episode of SyrupCast. My name is Daniel Bader, and I am joined this week and most weeks by the one, the only, Douglas Soltis. How are you, sir?
Banana boat emoji.
Yeah. Although it's not really an emoji.
Two emojis.
Where? I don't see them.
Synergy.
Okay. Can we talk for a second about Slack React emojis? Reactojis? How do you pronounce them?
I don't know, but I know you have to be a Slack developer. Like, why can't Slack just make like a toolbar? Where's the drag and drop emoji integration that I want?
Oh, you can. They put it in yesterday. Oh yeah, you were busy yesterday. You don't know any of this.
Yeah.
They added reaction emojis, so you can actually like click on the little cog next to a message and add a reaction emoji to every message. It's amazing. It's life-changing.
Oh, add a reaction. Okay, I thought Slack developers had to integrate this.
No. It's available to everybody.
Oh, sweet. So I can basically +1. You can upvote Slack comments now. Great.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because we needed more ways to not do work at work.
So this week we got a bit of a grab bag. We're kind of in the summer doldrums, so we're just gonna go through.
This is a crazy
beautiful day
week.
outside. No, totally. But it's mostly like news. There's not a lot of like hardware reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
We do have a few reports from the information that the next Nexus will be made from Huawei. This corroborates a lot of other rumors that we've heard, but I think we're getting close to the point where we can safely say that at least one of the Nexus devices for 2015 will be made from Huawei. What do you think? Do you care? Does it matter? Is it a good thing? Huawei makes some decent devices. We got some rumors coming out of Samsung camp, Korea camp, that the Galaxy Note 5 will be here earlier than expected. Why? Well, a certain fruit company is influencing the industry more so than ever. We have a new roaming plan by T-Mobile that kind of puts Rogers Roam Like Home to shame. Not in a terrible way. It's just that they don't charge anything.
No. Game of Thrones. Shame. Shame. Shame.
Google and BlackBerry are partnering on Android for Work to make it easier for Bez 12 admins to integrate its services on Android. Can Android be ever recognized as that secure OS that people want it to be? I think this is a good start. We'll talk a little bit about the iOS 9 public beta and the second Android M technical preview. And if we have some time over, we'll talk a little basketball. This is SyrupCast. All right, Douglas, let's start with the Nexus. The Nexus is one of those lines that everybody kind of loves, but never really sells in high volume. The next Nexus, the Nexus, whatever the device is called this year, it will be probably one of the most anticipated devices of the year, largely because the Nexus 6 was so disappointing, and not in a bad product way, but just it didn't go with the expectations of what people think of a Nexus phone, right?
It wasn't cheap.
It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't small, and it wasn't. It just wasn't accessible, you know? So what does this year's Nexus phone need? Does it need to just be a smaller version of the Nexus 6? Or, well, that was the Moto X. Or does it need to be like a redux of the Nexus 5 with better specs?
Well, so that's it. You just kind of stumbled upon it there. Like with the last generation Nexus was caught between, Motorola was already making what people would have expected from a new Nexus with the Moto X, so they just made a bigger version of that phone. The Huawei. The Huawei rumor is interesting because what do we predominantly know them for? Making mid-range to mid-high-end phones that are really well built and exciting, but maybe not so much liking the OS, right? So this could be kind of a rollback to a traditional Nexus scenario, or really exciting to people who might be interested in checking out one of their phones but want the sweet stock goodness.
Right.
So I'm excited by it, but I don't know. The cost thing is interesting because I don't know if how Google's going to respond to that, right? Because I've always argued that they've used Nexus as a way to keep the OEMs in line, provide a platonic ideal Android experience. And then they tried to, or they sold that at a traditional smartphone price, and it didn't exactly hit in the way that previous had. But I think it's because without any marketing, without any branding, the only people buying this are the Android heads who want that stock experience at the right price. And it's just a simple fact that to move units, you need marketing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Huawei's never really been, the US government wants nothing to do with Huawei's network equipment. So they've never really had a big presence in the US. They have an R&D center in Canada. They've done a ton of marketing here. They have some relationships with the carriers. So Canadians are more familiar with Huawei smartphones than people in the US. And Huawei's white labeled a few devices there, but they've never really kind of gotten the recognition that they have in other parts of the world. And I mean, considering that Huawei is one of the biggest manufacturers of smartphones in the world, you know, they sell like 50 to 60 million units of smartphones a quarter, but that's mostly in China. So, you know, whereas you have companies like Apple that sell everywhere and Samsung that sell everywhere, Huawei is still very much localized to the Asia Pacific region.
Do you think that this is like a really smart way for them to kind of introduce themselves more firmly in the North American market, to build out those carrier relationships and start selling here?
I guess,
or to get a consumer, because if you don't have the carrier relationships, customers won't know about you. But if you make the Nexus device for Google, people will know who's making it. So your future devices, it might be like you'll have a customer base that you could possibly sell to as you develop those carrier relationships.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think that there's something to be said for, you know, kind of stealth marketing. And this is the best kind of stealth marketing that Huawei could do. They're not marketing their own phone. They're relying on Google to do it for them. The Nexus phone is partially, you know, it's something that is always co-branded, right? So you have a Nexus logo and you'll have the OEM's logo on the device. Google does a lot of the heavy lifting. They distribute it on their store. They obviously will work with the carriers to get those phones on the shelves. So, you know, not every Nexus phone has the same distribution as, say, like a high-end Samsung or HTC. But at least in Canada, you'll always see Rogers, Bell, Telus sell the latest Nexus. And they'll also make it available on the Google Store unlocked. So, you know, you have this dichotomy where Huawei is really pushing to try to find a way to get North Americans to understand what they're doing. And I was in Barcelona at Mobile World Congress when they unveiled the Huawei Watch, which is the company's first Android Wear smartwatch.
The Huawei.
Yeah, and it's a great piece of hardware, and they did a good job with it. But what struck me was that it was such the device part of that business is so small, like minuscule compared to the network side, the the small cell LTE strategy for a city. Like Huawei will, if I'm the city of Toronto and I want to install Wi-Fi in all of the street lamps, I'll go to a company like Huawei and I'll say, I need you to give me an overview of how you're going to install this. And they'll say, okay, well, we're going to install small cell routers here, antennas here. We can add LTE connectivity here. So if you want to bolster your network at the same time as install Wi-Fi, they do airport like they do everything. Any possible like network rollout,
Drake
Huawei
Knight
is the master.
ACC, gotta get those tweets out. But okay, so we get why this is good for them as getting the foot in the door in the North American market. Why would Google choose them? Is there a reciprocal relationship internationally there, or like are they just running through the list? Like, what has been traditionally Google's evaluation process for choosing an OEM to build a Nexus device?
You know, I mean, they've been very opaque about the selection process over the years. So it's really difficult to say how a company will get selected. For example, Samsung did 2 Nexus phones, LG did 2 Nexus phones, Motorola's done 1, HTC's done 1, but they've also done a tablet. So, and Asus has done a tablet but no phones, right? So we have this sort of like, okay, well, we'll partner with the company that makes sense in the moment. LG was coming up on its, biggest. They were also kind of this nascent Android manufacturer looking for its big break, and they worked with Google to co-market the Optimus G and the Nexus 4 at the same time, and then with the Nexus 5 and the G3 that came out around the same time. So, we have this, dual benefit, but at the same time, Apple is eating Android's lunch in China. I mean, China is obviously it's a very different market. Google Play services do not exist in China. They just don't work there. Apple has had to really push to get the iPhone into China, and it's doing a great job. It's developed a custom SKU that work under the Chinese networks. It's developed a version of the App Store that is, seriously censored, but they have been selling gangbusters there. Companies like Xiaomi and Lenovo, ZTE, those are the Android OEMs in China that do great work, but they don't have any connection with Google. Google just does not have its own presence. Even though Android rules China, Google doesn't really do anything to help it.
Also, so don't they try to make their OSs look like iOS? They try to make their Android skins.
Yeah, that's what Xiaomi's done with MIUI, right? It's basically just a clone of, until recently at least, it was a clone of iOS using Android. But more to the point, what I've heard is that the partnership with Huawei over the Nexus is also going to help Google launch a self-branded app store in China. So I think that's probably why they're trying to get in bed with Xiaomi, or with Huawei, at least right now.
Okay, this might be a good point to mention that anyone tuning into this can post a question and ask us, or post comments if we have questions, and answer our unknowns using this wonderful Google Hangouts technology we have.
I don't think anybody wants to do that right now. We only have a couple of viewers, but
don't be shy, guys. Don't be shy guy.
The other thing, though, is that does anybody other, it's such a inside baseball thing to even give a shit about the Nexus, right? The Nexus phone hasn't, even though it's been relatively popular from, I see Nexus 5s all the time because they were cheap and they worked really well. But I haven't seen many Nexus 6s, because why would you choose a Nexus 6 over a Samsung or an HTC or an LG?
Well, because because the whole thing was, it's easier to get the difference between stock Android experience and OEM Android experience has moved ever closer. And if you're not getting that super cheap price, the only people that I knew that would buy a Nexus device were people who work in tech in some way, or developers, right? Because that's what they knew. They could just order it online, get it. You don't see the common folk using it. So its impact on, say, the smartphone industry as a market share thing is not significant, but its impact on, as a benchmark for where Android is and where Android's going, is fairly significant.
Exactly.
It's often the device, in addition to, say, Samsung's latest Galaxy release, that is put contra the iPhone. So it's important in the sense, it's usually this is the best that that Android can do from the OEM and then from the stock perspective. But in terms of just market share numbers, no.
But does it? I mean, it shouldn't matter that the Nexus line. I mean, using that logic, it shouldn't matter that the Nexus line has 0 market share.
Yeah.
If they sell 1 million Nexus phones, but 20% of them are developers, then they've done their job.
Yeah, leader sets the pace, and if that's what they're using, you know, it'd be great. You know, we talk about this all the time about like OS fragmentation and device fragmentation on Android. You know, I think if every Android user was using a Nexus device and maybe the flagship OEM devices, they would have much better experiences on Android. But that's not the case, right? So I think it's interesting because, you know, in terms of beyond consumer experience, we're tracking this of how Android as a ecosystem can be changing, and this is a significant lateral shift. But we won't see it play out until, you know, this time next year.
But we also have heard that there may be 2 Nexus phones this year. Now that seems to be less and less of a rumor. You know, I think that we're hearing, you know, LG was supposed to make a larger Nexus and HTC was supposed to, or Huawei is supposed to make a smaller one, but we're not sure whether that's actually going to be the case. You know, there's for sure going to be at least one Nexus phone. It sounds like it's going to be from Huawei. And, you know, there's that possibility, at least from, you know, my perspective, if they did release a second Nexus, you know, would it need to be the sort of iPhone 6 Plus to the, you know, regular Nexus iPhone 6? Like, does that even matter?
Well, I think we've reached a point where there is 2 divergent phone experiences, and one is like, you know, a regular phone size, and the other is like the super phone size. Like we're out of the hysteria of the phone. The next phone has to be a little bit bigger to be better, and there are now 2 general aspect ratios and sizes that people desire. So having 2 Nexus versions of that kind of makes sense. But, you know, a lot of the performance considerations and like identity and choices that we talk about a lot with devices would be purely on the hardware side. So it would be interesting to see how those devices would differ, especially if they're coming from 2 different manufacturers. You know, like like the difference between, say, the Galaxy S6 and then the Note, like they're designed in relation to each other, and same with the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. But if you have 2 manufacturers making Nexus devices, one big and then one Biggie Smalls, like what if one's just vastly superior to the other, but it's more expensive because it makes things more interesting, right?
So yeah, I thought about that a lot with the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, right? Like there were only a handful of substantive differences between the 2 devices other than the size. You know, with the larger size came a higher screen resolution, fair enough. They also added optical image stabilization to the camera. But, you know, there was $100 price difference between the 2, right? There wasn't a whole lot of price difference, whereas the whole idea of a Nexus device has heretofore been about affordability. So if we have, you know, a 5-inch refresh Nexus 5 at $350, and then a 6-inch or 5.7-inch Nexus 6, you know, refresh at $700, like the Nexus 6 was this year, then I don't see the purpose. You know, it's not like it's a regular and a plus. It's like those are completely different products, because one is clearly, you know, I don't like to use the word subsidized, because it's not Google subsidizing the phone. But at the same time, they're certainly taking less of a margin, or they're asking the OEM to take less of a margin on this.
Yeah, they don't need to make money off of it. They break even, it's fine. It serves their agenda, right? And that's right. But, you know, we talk about Android and Google a lot being really concerned about making sure, you know, if they're connecting that next 2 billion people, that the devices have to be even cheaper.
Right.
Right.
And they've done that with Android One. Android One has been slowly rolling out over, you know, the Asia, India. You know, they just launched in Pakistan. They launched in Turkey. They have a few phones right now in India and Indonesia. I mean, these are good devices that cost less than $150.
Yeah. And you know why? So why they're doing that is to make sure that it's not only there's Android penetration there, but it's Android penetration with Google services.
No, it's I call it the shit phone revolution. There have been hundreds of millions of Android phones released that are just pieces of shit. They don't work properly. They're not supported. They are by manufacturers who churn out these commoditized pieces of plastic and call them smartphones. And they happen to run Android because it's free.
Yeah.
And that is not a solution to the increasingly important presence and placement of Google services, as you said correctly, in these developing nations.
Yeah.
Now, the Nexus phone hasn't really been targeted to developing nations until now, right?
Totally not.
They've been sequestered to Europe, you know, and North America, and that makes sense because a $400 phone, even though it's relatively inexpensive from a developed world perspective, is still 2 or 3 times the price that many people in India and Pakistan and Indonesia are willing to pay. That's
Totally.
just the reality. So the idea of Google refocusing and doubling down on the Nexus as an inexpensive gateway to stock Android, I think is important. It's an important way to push the message that Android is both powerful and accessible, right? And not only that, it allows developers. That's the problem, is that the Nexus has always been about making it easy for developers to make great Android great Android apps. And if developers are not willing to spend $700 on a Nexus 6, which many of them aren't and haven't, then we have a whole generation of developers that have skipped the latest and greatest from Google.
Totally. But I think the bigger problem is that there's a whole generation of people totally not using Lollipop.
Right.
That's a bigger problem. But I understand that it's for developers to give them the schematic for them to kind of experience that. So we have 2 comments from Candido Noguera. I'm sorry, man.
Noguera?
I'm really sorry. Noguera? But there's an I in there.
We're really sorry if you butchered that.
Just, yeah. So we're going to, but so he says, if Google introduced the Nexus 6 at the price of the Nexus 5, $399 Canadian, it would have sold a lot more. The size issue would not have been an issue, in my opinion. I own a Nexus 5 and 6 and love both devices. And then speaking of the next Nexuses, it all boils down to price if 2 Nexuses devices are introduced later this year. I agree with most of that, but on the second point, it's price, but it's also experience if they're made by 2 different manufacturers. Like, who knows if are they working in conjunction? Have they been given instructions by Google as to what types of devices those are supposed to be? It's all very interesting. But thank you for your comments.
We don't know this process. Like we were just saying, we don't know the process that goes into Google selecting an OEM for Nexus, you know, development. But I'm guessing that it's, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type of scenario. So, you know, clearly the LGs and Samsungs and HTCs don't make a lot of money off these products, right? Because they don't sell in great volume. But there must be something these companies gain from being a preferred Android partner, you know? And clearly they're not, nobody other than Samsung is making much money from the Android ecosystem.
Yeah.
So,
but no, it's okay. So in it beyond whatever, they might get a percentage of device sales or whatever, but they get a stack of cash, right? Like,
I don't know. I mean, they're making the hardware, so clearly they're making the money from, like, they're making the hardware margins. But the issue is they're not selling in volume. So if they're only selling,
I'm saying in addition to the agreement, there's probably something where they get paid to be the Nexus, not just for every device sold. Like,
I don't know. I think it's the other way around. I don't think Google pays anybody. I think these companies, if anything, are paying Google boatloads of cash to be in the Nexus program.
No, don't believe it for a second. Because they would be a losing proposition, because there's no way that they make, like, on the margins and the amount of devices sold, there is no reason for anyone to do that. Unless, like, Motorola is saying, like, we're literally just going to make a slightly larger Moto X. Google has to be paying these people to do it for them.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a virtuous cycle.
No, disagree. But we should investigate. I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. 2016, BlackBerry will make the Nexus.
Oh, man. Okay, let's
heard it here first. Remember, people.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how over the past couple of weeks we've seen BlackBerry increasingly get into bed with Google and Samsung, right? So whether that means that BlackBerry is actually going to release an Android phone remains to be seen. We've seen a couple of leaked renders by Evan Blass, who gave us a lot of really credible stuff over the years, but he's also given us some very uncredible stuff, namely the HTC One M9 leak earlier this year that everybody thought was going to be, the hotness, and it wasn't anything close to what it looked like. So, we have to take the good with the bad. That said, we do know, and it's been corroborated, that BlackBerry has at least been working with Google on a couple of things. Mm-hmm. For example, they've rolled out a partnership with Android at Work and Bez 12. So Bez 12 on the BlackBerry side can now more easily control Android devices in the enterprise. Mm-hmm. I can't say for certain whether that's a good thing, right? I mean, BlackBerry is a small but important part of the MDM ecosystem, right? The BYOD ecosystem is becoming more important. People want to use their home phones. The whole idea of Android at Work is that you compartmentalize your personal phone into personal and work sections. So you have a set of personal apps, mm-hmm. and then internally the phone is split, and then you get a set of business apps. And when you're in the business app section or the work app section, those apps do not talk and do not share information with your personal apps. So should your phone get stolen or hacked, those business apps that may have schematics for the next big project at your company, that is remotely deletable. It will never impact the personal stuff, and those two live in separate harmony. So I think that's important. I think that's good.
It goes beyond that, even where it's not even if a device gets stolen or hacked. It's about so in government or certain types of enterprise scenarios, if information can't legally transfer across a border, knowing where the device is and having access remotely to that information is a real thing, especially in legal and government scenarios. But so going back, because you're saying you can't say this is a good thing. I can definitely say it's a good thing. And we have to step back to where Google is with Android. Internationally, in emerging markets, they are fighting a battle to get low-end, entry-level handsets out with Google services to onboard a new generation of people to Google services to have their data to be able to sell them ads eventually. In the Western world, the emerged markets, their penetration and growth is going to come from enterprise. So broadly, they've been fighting this perception that of all the operating systems, Android is the least secure, most vulnerable, and not ready for business. So hence Android for Work, which was essentially a portfolio of partners across a bunch of different stacks. Let's see here, what was it? Management, devices, applications, and networking. Basically promoting that these are partners in making Android ready for enterprise. That relationship is extended with BlackBerry, who for them strategically, in an effort to generate revenue anywhere, have unbundled all their services from the BlackBerry OS and going cross-platform to, I guess, more thoroughly promote their BES system, enterprise mobility management on Android. So they signed agreements with Samsung. They were part of the Android for Work bundle, and it looks like they're getting closer with Google on this. So that for them, for BlackBerry, Google is basically like a reseller promoting BES 12 installs, which BlackBerry makes money on, right? Totally. BlackBerry also, it was right after the Android for Work announcement, BlackBerry announced the cross-platform experience suite for iOS, Android, and Windows, which is basically all the core BlackBerry 10 components can be had on any mobile platform for that work-life balance that you so accurately described. So I think that this is, it works for Google and it works for BlackBerry, and it works in a specific way that a Google-Samsung enterprise relationship doesn't, because Google doesn't necessarily want Samsung to be in control of Android, and Samsung really wants to be its own platform, right? So partnering with someone like Google that has really no horse in the race when it comes to owning a platform. And actually probably has more enterprise and security bona fides than Samsung makes sense. And Google can't partner with Microsoft because they're a competitor on a lot of different levels, right? So BlackBerry makes a lot of sense, which leads me to make my bold prediction that, say, maybe not 2017, let's say within the next 3 years, BlackBerry will make a Nexus device. And it will be, because all BlackBerry has ever done is made mid to high range phones that are moderately affordable, and running Android, I think that might sell like, that would certainly sell better than any BlackBerry released after the 9900.
All right, so I'm gonna stake my claim. I'm gonna put my foot in the sand.
Put your foot in the sand.
Hit my gavel, whatever analogy you want to.
Hit your gavel in the sand with your foot.
I will bet you $100 Canadian that BlackBerry will never create a Nexus phone. Never.
Never? Okay, I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet.
All right, deal. You just seen it here first, people. What's up, Evan Hindra? Nice to see you, man.
Evan Hindra saying Android One isn't working out in Indonesia, by the way. Speaking of emerging market, yeah, because so it's not necessarily working out, but it's something that Google is really trying to address. And maybe it's not going to be Android One, but it could be Project Aura. It's Aura, right? Or is it, which one's Tango? Tango and Aura. Aura is the modular.
Aura is the modular one.
Yeah.
Aura is launching in Puerto Rico later this year, which is very cool. I saw a demo of Project Aura at Google I/O this year, and it was, yeah, I mean, it's really useful to have the ability to swap out parts of a phone. You know, say one part fails, one part, you know, you need to augment your existing hardware with a bit more oomph. You need a better battery, a sharper camera, whatever. You just replace that module with a better version, and there he goes. But the real issue, going back to Android One, is that there isn't. It's the same issue that the Nexus line has had making a jump into the mainstream. The value proposition of a stock Android phone just isn't immediately apparent to the majority of buyers, right? Because the majority of buyers go through the carrier ecosystem. And as much as people understand Google as a search company, I don't think they quite understand Google or Android as a Google product, nor do I think they understand why one would choose a Nexus phone over, say, a Galaxy or, you know, another name brand Android.
Yeah, but people don't think of it. I agree with that, but people don't think of it like that. People definitely don't think of Android as a Google product necessarily. And often they don't even really think of Android. They think of their Samsung phone or their HTC phone or their whatever. That being said, when someone's in a carrier store and they're on the floor level, and like, you know, we know people who work at the phone selling level. They're like, oh, there's this phone. Here's the new Samsung phone. It's really high end. Well, I like this. I like the big screen, but it's a little bit too expensive for me. And they're like, what's that Nexus phone? It's like, oh, that's the good Android phone. It's like, doesn't have the dumb features. It's like the clean, you know, it's a little bit, it's for the person who kind of pays attention to their phone tech, who isn't coming in, you know, but they've never really pushed. I don't think it's been a problem that they haven't gone into the mass market. Nexus has never been designed to be a mass market phone, which is why I think it makes perfect sense for someone like BlackBerry to do this. Because if you're gonna make a phone every year that only sells like 1 to 3 million units, it might as well be a Nexus device.
Oh man, I cannot wait. I cannot wait until you give me $100. It's going to be so.
Well, at what point?
Satisfying $100.
Because you're saying never. So
well, okay, fine.
I
mean, we have to set a date because obviously, like, never could go on until both of us die.
Oh, or one of the two companies we just mentioned goes out of business or gets out of handset manufacturing.
Which one's more likely to go out of business first, Douglas?
Google.
Yeah, for sure.
Evan Hindra said 3 years is a long time, Tron. Some competitor will surely beat BlackBerry to the punch. Samsung's contribution to secure partition in ASOP AOSP is somewhat substantial. But yeah, like, but what does Samsung care now about making Nexus devices? I think what I'm saying is, like, structurally there is, of all the OEMs who would want an incentive to make Nexus devices, like, there's a reason why Huawei is now coming into the fore, and all the previous manufacturers who have made Nexus devices where they didn't sell a lot, and then their flagship devices which didn't sell, and they're losing money on Android, might not necessarily be big up to do another one. Whereas for someone like Huawei, where they have, like, it's an opportunity for them to enter a market, or BlackBerry, it's an opportunity for them to do something on the device side. And maybe, like, what if, like, wouldn't it be a great narrative for Google to say, hey, the next Nexus devices are just built for enterprise?
Yeah, so
at a reduced price, and they sell a boatload because BlackBerry can do, like, a very solid, like, the problem has always been the software. It's always been the OS. Like,
no, not now. I mean, I have no doubt that the next, whatever BlackBerry puts out, even if it's one of those, I mean, okay, so let's go back to
sort of software plus, and then, like, the lack of app ecosystem because of the BlackBerry 10 platform, right?
Sure. I mean, BlackBerry 10, I've argued, is a great platform that was just never used because developers don't want a fourth platform. So
they don't want a third platform either.
They don't want a third platform, and we'll talk about that very soon. But I think it's safe to say that BlackBerry should and is probably experimenting with Android. If it doesn't, I think John Chen's one of those guys who just looks at an opportunity, goes, "Fuck it, let's try this. If it doesn't work, we'll go into the next one." Like, he's using the lean methodology to run a huge company. Except the company is not really huge anymore. It's worth like $3 billion, but still, I mean, it's a very large business with a lot of moving parts. And he's basically saying, okay, I'm literally willing to try anything to make a buck. And if it means moving to Android and using QNX for everything other than our smartphones, we'll do it. Because QNX is a valuable asset that will perpetuate its value forever, because it's never going away. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be run in, like, nuclear submarines and other things. But
but as I've pointed out recently with the IoT stuff, a lot of this devices running QNX can't necessarily be updated to be IoT connected and smart, right? So that install base isn't an actionable install base. But I think you're right about Chen. Like, these small little bets, these incremental little gains, like, he's trying to generate revenue anywhere he can while trimming overhead and costs to get the company back to growth and profitability. So partnering with Google on Android for work, and then having a more sustained BES 12 relationship, they're leveraging Google's strength and distribution to sell more software licenses, which just bring in revenue. Like, that's great for them. I'm saying, I could see them taking it one step farther. The one drawback to this little prediction of mine that really hurts them is that BlackBerry's gotten so far out of the manufacturing process. Like, they've been looking, like, Foxconn's been making their devices, right? Beyond the initial design. And I'm not really sure how the Nexus devices are manufactured, if they're manufactured by the OEM straight up, or if Google even plays a role in that. But as BlackBerry's kind of gotten fully out of the full stack kind of production of a piece of hardware, like, would Google want BlackBerry making the next Nexus device that's manufactured by Foxconn?
Well, okay, so I don't think BlackBerry has entirely gotten out of the hardware business. For example, I learned this after the fact, that the BlackBerry Leap is actually manufactured in Mexico. It's still manufactured in BlackBerry's facilities. It was only, it was designed in. Sorry, no, I'm totally wrong. I'm talking about the Z3. The BlackBerry Leap was designed in house. So I said, so
is the Passport, and so is the Classic.
Right. So I said in my review initially, after hearing from somebody at BlackBerry and Mobile World Congress, that it was designed and built by an ODM, not Foxconn. It was another one, but apparently that's not the case. It was designed in house, and everything except the manufacturing was done at BlackBerry's Canadian headquarters. The problem, and this is, I mean, Apple does this, right? Apple doesn't create its own devices. They don't own any manufacturing facilities. They use Foxconn just like BlackBerry is. It's that BlackBerry's entered into a relationship with Foxconn where they'll say, okay, the Z4, the whatever cheap and cheerful smartphone running BlackBerry 10 that may sell a couple 100,000 units but make us a decent profit margin, we'll let you do that, because really there's no benefit to us in doing that anymore.
Yeah, you source all the parts and you like, but there's a difference between Apple being like, we're going to use your scaling to produce this thing that you have specially built facilities for to produce our devices and our source components, and BlackBerry going with a like a CAD file or whatever you use to like the phone design, and then Foxconn figuring it out. And I can't remember what was it not the Passport, but it was the Classic. Was it the Classic manufacturer? I just heard a lot of scuttlebutt this time last year that BlackBerry was really pissed because the term, I can't remember the term, but basically the manufacturing rate, of 100 devices made, how many are defective coming off the line?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of them.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. Like, more so, but also the device was like rushed to be like, Chen needed to generate some revenue in the quarter, so you make things happen, right? And I think you'll see probably things being a little bit more stable, a little bit more long term. But yeah, like why not BlackBerry? Better than
Why not BlackBerry is like the lamest and probably most apropos slogan BlackBerry could have. It's like, come on, guys, why not us? Like we're doing good over here.
But okay, so wasn't that the Atlanta Hawks or the Washington Wizards playoff? Like, why not us? But I've just given you all the reasons as to why, but I haven't heard a good reason as to why it shouldn't be them. Or why it should be any other Android manufacturer over them.
Well, because BlackBerry has said outright that it doesn't know what it's doing with its hardware future. Now,
yeah, but that was really tied to BlackBerry 10, though, wasn't it? Like BlackBerry 10's dead. It's
not dead. It'll continue to live on in a couple more devices this year. Whether they'll bring it into 2016, 2017, I think BlackBerry 10 is a great enterprise OS. I don't think that BlackBerry 10 will die. I just think that they need to take the messaging away from the average smartphone buyer, because to most people, the two devices that you choose between are the Samsung Galaxy S whatever and the iPhone whatever, right? When you enter a carrier store, it's not like we're discounting BlackBerry and considering all the other Android OEMs. Like most of the other Android OEMs don't even enter the picture, with the average smartphone buyer. And then the more savvy ones, they know LG, they know HTC. They may want a Nokia, they may want a Windows phone. They may look at the Alcatel One Touch and go, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I'll try that." But by and large,
we got in this argument about brand recognition before. Well, I will still argue that the average North American knows BlackBerry before they know HTC.
No, the average BlackBerry is certainly more recognizable.
I'm not even talking about device recognition or market penetration. I'm just brand recognition. BlackBerry as a brand is far more recognizable in North America than HTC.
Right, but how is that a benefit? So you've brought this up again and again, how BlackBerry is more, the brand is more recognizable. But when it has inherently negative associations for a lot of people,
because it wouldn't be, hey, BlackBerry finally made an Android phone. Oh, I can get an Android phone and it's not running BlackBerry 10 and I can get Android apps. Like, it's because the awareness leads to, whereas HTC is fighting to stand out against Samsung. Like, there has been negative connotation in the past, but there is awareness of that brand, and I would still say there'd be legacy affinity for it.
Okay, I recognize Tang. I'll use Tang as an example. When I go to the grocery store, I fucking look at Tang and go, wow, my childhood was really, really full of sugar. But I will never buy Tang ever again. And my kids will not drink Tang because I know how bad it was for me. Right? It's the same idea. You know, BlackBerry, just because you recognize a brand does not mean that people are going to buy it. There is a delta between brand recognition. There's a huge gap between brand recognition and brand solidarity.
It's actually called brand sentiment. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm just saying that it would be a way for BlackBerry to leverage its brand. I'm just saying that it's hard for an Android OEM to stand out. We've been talking a lot recently about should BlackBerry make an Android phone. I'm saying if they were ever to make an Android phone, man, would it be awesome if they made a Nexus. That's the one where it makes like the most sense. Because I don't want to see I want to see stock Android on a BlackBerry. I don't want to see a version of BlackBerry 10 Android, you know?
Yeah, and I totally get that. I do.
Joel's asking if BB does go Android, will they update the BB10 devices to Android? Does not work that way. It would be.
I mean, yeah, I don't think it would. I don't think it would work that way, but I think technically it may be possible.
Well, like at a firmware level, like just booting up, I do not think it wouldn't be. No. I mean, like it'd be far more likely that like if they made an Android device and signed on that agreement, then they get access to Google services. They sign a Google services agreement, and then you might see Google services on BB10 or the Google Play Store, but they wouldn't update to Android. That's a technical infeasibility and a total headache nightmare. It'd be more important for them to just be able to run Android apps right from the Google Play Store and have Google services, or not be denied Google services. You know,
I mean, Google services is really the the raison d'etre for building an Android phone for BlackBerry. You know, they know that that is the biggest barrier to adoption for the kind of user that goes after an Android phone, right? So I totally acknowledge that buying an Android BlackBerry could yield a really good experience, and that it may actually convert a lot of the older nostalgic BlackBerry users to new supporters. But Samsung is so far ahead, and I'm going to use this as an example because this week HTC came out with its recent quarterly earnings. This is HTC. I mean, this is the BlackBerry of Android, right? If you're talking about nostalgia, you're talking about a company that was worth, $30 billion in 2011, a company that was by far and away the most popular Android OEM for 2 years, right?
No, the BlackBerry of Android is Motorola, but I hear what you're saying.
Okay, fine. But let me just use HTC as an example here because they were the first Android manufacturer. They had a huge and very close relationship with Google. They largely defined Android in its early days and have fallen off a cliff, both from a sales perspective and a stock perspective. The company is really just losing everything. And they're putting all their chips in so-called mid-range smartphones and virtual reality, right? Like the HTC Vive, I've seen it. It's a really cool product, but it's not going to save them, right? So whether or not HTC survives is going to be based on the strength of its smartphone portfolio. And I just don't see that recovering anytime soon, right? Ron Amadio from Ars Technica has a great write-up. If you haven't seen it, we'll put it in the show notes about how HTC has really struggled to regain any footing since its last 4 profitable quarters. And he blames a lot of it, rightfully so, on the 1M9. And, some blame can be put on Qualcomm and the Snapdragon 810 overheating, but most of it just is about HTC not iterating where it had an opportunity. It didn't revolutionize anything. It replaced a bad camera with a bad camera. It kept the design largely the same over 3 years, and it just didn't entice people the way that the Galaxy S6 enticed people.
Totally.
And we say that, okay, fine, the Galaxy S5 was a disappointment compared to the 4, but Samsung had the momentum that HTC never had, right? Even selling, just 20 million units of the Galaxy S5 people were like, okay, it's a disappointment, but it's 20 million units. That's objectively a lot of dough.
Yeah, it'd be a win for HTC. Yeah, no, I get that, and that's why, like, if it doesn't make sense for any of these major manufacturers, major Android OEMs, like if they've been stung by the Nexus scorpion tail before, and like Motorola doing it most recently, probably because they
Shout out Dorn.
Yeah. Dinklage, Peter Dinklage. I'm sorry. If Motorola most recently did it just because they had previously been owned by Google, if there was ever a company that could do something like this, has really, like, BlackBerry's never going to be a Samsung. They're never going to be an Apple. They're never going to be a Google. That time in which they were competing at a consumer electronics level to be a global titan in that way is done. They're an enterprise services, an IoT company now that can still make hardware. So if they were able to make like the stock Nexus device, that's really compelling, or more compelling than for any of the other OEMs who are just struggling how to figure out how to make money off of Android, right? Because BlackBerry wouldn't make money off of Android; they make money off their services. Ali asked a question: what do you guys think about BlackBerry 10 with Google services? I've written about this before. Never going to happen. First of all, Google has no incentive to bring Google services to BlackBerry 10. And the way that Android works is, if you want Google services, you sign up as an Android OEM and you don't fork that stuff. As I've written before on the site, there was a tentative agreement back in the day where BlackBerry would essentially give up and add the Google Play Store in exchange for getting access to Google services, which would be like kind of a requirement for the Google Play Store to really run. But it never worked out. And then BlackBerry eventually kind of made the same deal with the Amazon App Store. So the likelihood of BlackBerry 10 ever having Google services is like, you know, it might be a nice get for BlackBerry if they were like the Nexus manufacturer, but don't expect it, you know. Like, hey, you can't underestimate how epically pissed Google was that BlackBerry started running Android apps on BlackBerry 10 without being even forking Android or being an Android manufacturer. Like, they were really pissed off. And the negative relationship between BlackBerry and Google goes back to like Gmail days, like Gmail integration in like BlackBerry 6 and BlackBerry 5, back when Google was mostly Gmail and search. So the fact that they're even working together on Android for Work, and the BlackBerry is, what is it, like the Enterprise Suite, is just a sign of like a new relationship. So, you know,
and one that, you know, is to be encouraged, right? Because I think, you know, the 2012, 2013, 2014, a lot of those years was defined by animosity between the big tech players. You know, Microsoft tried to cordon off its own slice of the pie, and they tried to do everything their own way. It didn't work. BlackBerry tried to build up BlackBerry 10. It didn't work. They brought in Amazon. It still didn't work. Google really went it alone, tried to build up Android. It frickin' worked. Gangbusters. It's done really well for them. But at the same time, how much money are they actually making from Android? How much money are they making from mobile search? Apple is Apple, right? They've just gone in one direction, and that's just up, right?
Yeah.
Hockey stick growth.
Margins,
so, you know, Apple's really the only company that can say they've outright won the smartphone wars of the last 3 years. Samsung has made a boatload of money from their hardware, but they've been struggling to build up the surrounding platform, you know, without relying or overly relying on Google, right? So the one remaining tension is, will Samsung give up the ghost and try to just accept that it won't be a software platform provider?
I don't think if Sony has still not learned the lesson of what it's good at, I don't see Samsung doing it anytime soon. And it's the type of thing where, like, Samsung, to climb the wheel, to sit to sit on the throne, the Iron Throne, you got to get higher up the stack. And for Samsung, they have the hardware stack down, but they don't have the platform stack. They're building on someone else's platform, so that platform wins. There will inherently be that tension. The animosity that you were just describing was at a time when mobile was a land grab. Nobody owned anything, and now it's settled. There's consolidation, which leads to greater partnership. It's a natural evolution. You'll probably see all these people in mobile participating with each other until IoT and VR becomes a problem, and then you're going to have like Google fighting Sony, fighting Facebook, like fighting Microsoft. It's not a wheel so much as a cylinder, or what's a DNA strand? What's a helix?
Helix. Ribonucleic acid.
Yeah.
Deoxy.
So, I apologize to anyone who can hear my upstairs neighbor, who is, I guess by definition, a saxophone player, but
he's actually just like killing raccoons.
Basically, it's just, oh yeah.
So what do you want to talk about? There's a couple
we've potted for an hour on 2 subjects, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love these kinds of things. But let's talk a little bit about
talk to me about iOS 9. Like if we talk about Google, I guess we have to talk about Microsoft, right? Maybe you want to save the iOS stuff until you've tried the newest version of the beta and just talk about Microsoft.
No, I mean I'll talk for like 40 seconds. Like
okay.
iOS 9, don't download it on your main device. Big improvements on iPad, mediocre improvements on iPhone. I like the font changes. I like the integration with search on the home screen. I would have liked to see a bit of a redesign on the home screen as well. Acknowledgement that people actually want to personalize their devices.
Shout out to Tom Emmerich.
Yeah, shout out to TM or TE. Shit. I think that there's a lot that Apple could do with iOS 9 that they didn't, and I think that it's just part of their conservatism. But I think that if you love iOS, this is just going to make you love it even more, because this is the first release. I mean, iOS 8 was just a glimpse of this, but this is the first release that it really feels like Apple is creating a desktop class operating system for the mobile ecosystem, for the mobile world, right? There's real, and I'm not, okay, I know I'm going to get slammed for this, but I don't believe that Samsung taking Android and bludgeoning it and then forcing it to be a multitask friendly OS is the same thing, because Android hasn't really been designed for 2 apps to be open at the same time. Multi-window on Samsung devices works okay, but it's not nearly as seamless as it is on iOS 9 on the iPad.
Yeah, but Android's like, Google's also been really good about future-proofing Android and like replacing its runtime and doing that stuff, right? Like I think, you know, what these platforms can do and can become can really evolve over time. I would say, I think you're totally on point. I would say iOS 9 is not intended to be really anything new. Like they straight up said that this is going to be like a house cleaning, probably for iOS 10 to be a big deal, and maybe a better merger of the or a further merger of the desktop and tablet and watch OSs. But yeah, having your current phone run better is pretty cool. It's a pretty new experience for an iPhone user. And at the end of the day, like I'm pretty happy with what phones do. Having them be able to do it longer and better. Like my concern is still making my phone work better with my laptop, with my smartwatch, with my VR headset, right? Like phones are phones. We figured phones out. And
we've had 9 years.
Yeah. Well, we've had like 20 years. Shout out Nokia, the original Motorola, original BlackBerry. Yeah,
let's pour one out for Nokia, man. Like
I'm out of booze coffee, but I will pour one out for the 20,000 people that have been.
I'm just gonna drink it. I'm gonna pour it out of my mouth.
Yeah, I'm be pouring out on my floor. That's ridiculous.
So let's talk about this, because 7,800 layoffs, $7.6 billion write-down of the Nokia devices and services division. We sort of knew it was coming. I mean, the fact that there wasn't a high-end Nokia or Lumia flagship released in the last year really spoke to Microsoft's just insecurity around Windows Phone. Obviously, we're having, we get Windows 10 Mobile. I just installed the latest. Let me just see if it's updated. I've installed the latest preview on my 830. So like it's working pretty well. It looks good.
The last time we talked about this though, you said it was really bad.
Oh no, that was like the first preview. Okay. This is way faster. Like everything here is looking really good. It's just a matter of like, does it matter? Does Microsoft even care about Windows Phone anymore? Is it something that people are going to look back on and go, oh man, I wish Windows Phone had worked out, because the Palm Pre, that was a really good device. Oh wait, I'm confusing the two dead platforms that nobody's going to care about. Because like really, I mean, I look back on this and I go, Palm OS, like, or the Pre was, or Web OS was a great operating system. It worked really well.
No, it wasn't. You know why? Because it wasn't an operating system. It was a great visual design demonstration, but it never became an OS because no one used it. It never had any apps. Like it didn't actually function.
Okay, so Windows Phone got a bit further than that, but I mean, by and large, it didn't really. It still doesn't have any apps. You know.
So the Harry McCracken, who you should follow on Twitter, I think was the person who said this, in that what's happening with Windows Phone right now isn't necessarily Microsoft's admission that it was a failed strategy so much as them halting a strategy in midstream. They're just cutting bait, right? Yeah, they're resetting. The sadness comes from the fact that there's a giant, first of all, like, hey, Windows Phone could have been really cool. Maybe we would have wanted it. Although it's tough to be that fourth or third. Like they were just late. That's what happens in platform wars. If you're too late, you lose. So they're cutting bait on that. But there's a human cost in like, we were like 25,000 people in the past
2 years.
Yeah, and predominantly
they laid off 15,000 last October.
Yeah, almost all of them, or significant amount, being people brought over from Nokia. So Nokia died for no reason. We were just bought, transferred over, and then ripped apart. Thanks. And you have the scenario now where like, what's the big deal of if Microsoft is killing their devices division, their mobile devices division, what's the big deal of Windows 10 working, desktop, tablet, everything in mobile, if they're not making mobile hardware? Because I think, as you pointed out, the vast majority of, actually, let me bring up the stats here. 97% of the Windows Phone market share is Lumia.
Yeah.
And I feel like every other Windows Phone OEM did it on a dare or like a drunken thing that was signed. So like, what's the point of building a platform like Windows 10 that can work on any screen if you're not making the screens? So, wow, man, we haven't heard from, is Jeff Broussard alive? Like, do we know that how is he taking this?
He commented the last episode.
Yeah, but that was before Microsoft laid off another 8,000 people. So yeah, I know The Verge wrote a lot about like, did Microsoft just kill Windows Phone? But this is I don't know how many shoes are on these feet, but it's definitely at least the second shoe to drop.
Look, I think that it's safe to say, and like let's not go overboard. Windows Phone is dead, but Windows 10 Mobile is certainly not, and that's the new name. And I think what happened was they figured out that they could build a single OS and iterate on multiple screen sizes, right? So they have, instead of under two different divisions, create two different OSs with the same kernel, they have a single OS that scales just like a responsive web design. We don't have three different versions of Mobilesyrup for, the web, for tablet, and for mobile. We have a single design that just scales properly.
Yeah, but who's going to make the screen? Like, who's going to make, like, what small screen is Windows 10 going to run on if Microsoft isn't making it?
They are. I mean, they've promised Lumia devices for later this year. I certainly don't think that no Lumia devices will be released in the future. I think that they're consolidating. They're making their business run more efficiently, and unfortunately, that is the reality of.
I don't see, with the cuts that they're making, I don't see them really having more than like. Where are you seeing that Microsoft isn't making any more phones? There are probably just 6 devices on the way, says Joel Rushworth. Where did you see that Microsoft?
They are. No. We're not saying that they're not making more phones. Don't worry.
But the problem is
more phones.
I think yeah, we're tying together the fact that they're laying off all the people in these divisions. Like at a certain point, you need people. Like these are the teams who are supposed to be making the devices. So maybe it's a 1 device a year, like a kind of a Surface scenario.
Yeah, a Surface phone. And a lot of people are saying that this is kind of what's going to happen, is that Microsoft's going to release maybe a Surface, a small Surface tablet, a big Surface tablet, like a Pro, and then do maybe a couple of Lumia phones. The thing is, and Tom Warren from The Verge, he talks about this on Twitter the other day with Mark Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley, I want to say. Mary, I'm butchering her name. But they were having a conversation, and I was looking at this, and I was going, Tom was saying that it would be a shame for Microsoft to just make a couple of devices per year because they'd be missing out on all these potential markets. And people were saying, well, Apple does that successfully. Why is it not okay for Microsoft to do the same thing? But I think that Apple does this successfully because they've never tried to be a low margin smartphone player. They've never apologized for charging $500 for their smartphones.
Yep.
The highest selling Windows phone is the Lumia 520, which is or the 530 or the 535. They're $150 smartphones. They're not expensive, right? So it's a different scenario here. There is a market for high-end Lumias.
Mary Jo Foley.
Mary Jo Foley, thank you.
Paul Thoreau.
Mark Thoreau, I said, right?
Yeah. Joel Rushworth holding it down for us. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
But yeah, no, so you're right. Like, and it's, having, access to certain market, like you need to convince people why they would be interested in the first place before you have, all the different color variants and got to catch them all Pokemon style. And Microsoft has proven for the most part that it can make hardware. Like the Surface tablets from a hardware perspective are really well made. The Xbox division, although it's completely separate part of the company, well-made hardware. Like Microsoft has shown that it can make hardware. It's always been the software or the platform as a whole and its strength. So if they can make one phone that everyone wants to use and it has all those Windows 10 apps running on it, that might be something. But man, did they just like, they believe in mobile everywhere, but everywhere doesn't have to necessarily be Windows 10. It's just, it's a pretty big cutback.
The other thing that we're not talking about that we should is that HoloLens is running on Windows 10 as well. So we have this very ambitious strategy where Microsoft's creating a single operating system. For all intents and purposes, it's the same operating system that it's going to be running on multiple screens. And that is the smartphone really the screen that Microsoft needs to focus on? They have now a huge penetration of its services and software on iOS and Android. They just bought Sunrise, Wunderlist, and Acompli. So they've rolled out, productivity, calendar, and email, right? They have a pretty good selection of productivity apps with their Office suite on iOS and Android. Not to mention, they've just released Mac Office 2016 for Mac. They have a great version of it available for Windows 10 as well. There are so many things that Microsoft is doing right.
Yeah.
Do they really need to have
yes
a presence on Windows Phone itself?
There needs to be a phone checkbox. It's too much of a everyone has a phone. Like they need to be there.
I don't think they do. I really don't. I think they need to understand where their strengths are, and they don't need to have Windows Phone anymore. But I mean,
well, whatever Windows, like Windows 10 phone or whatever.
Windows 10 mobile. But I mean, it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. And obviously, it's a different situation than iOS. They're still offering Windows 10 mobile to OEMs, so we may see, who knows what we'll see. We'll see maybe Samsung and HTC release a Windows 10 mobile device this year or next year.
Yeah, but again, no one's going to care about those devices. Like the carriers sell those devices, and the carriers need to care, right?
We're not saying that Lumia is never. I mean, Microsoft is going to release more Lumia phones. This isn't a question of whether they're going to release more. It's about how many more they release and how many per year, and whether or not they can compete in the high end, right? Those high margin phones that make these companies profit. Or are they willing to take a loss on each phone in order to just perpetuate the idea that Microsoft is still in the mobile ecosystem? Because let's look at Sony, right? Let's look at what they said last week.
Yeah.
The head of Sony's mobile division said, "We are never going to get out of the mobile phone industry." And it's not because they're making money off the phones, but because the phone is the center of our world. Because we use phones as a way to connect to IoT, to video game consoles, to your connected light bulbs, your Nest cams, your your smartwatch, whatever Sony is making money on in other areas. That is all funneled through the smartphone. And to me, that's important for them to have that. It's important for them to have that. They probably are going to lose money and therefore shouldn't keep doing it, because they're going to continue writing off billions and billions of dollars worth of inventory.
Just do it in a totally different way than you've been doing it, Sony. Like wake up and smell the coffee, and do it in a way like quit releasing 6 versions. Like quit undercutting the release of your next phone with the new stuff. Like market the hell out of it. When was the last time you saw a Sony phone ad on TV? They need the next big thing.
Why do you need the Sony phone ad on TV?
So when mom goes into the carrier and asks about it, they can ask about the phone. That's why people buy Samsung phones, other than the fact that they're good. People buy Samsung phones because LeBron James advertises them, and they have huge market presence, and people are aware of Samsung phones. People like Samsung phones because they're well made. Who even knows that Sony makes smartphones?
What are you talking about? Until this year, Samsung made squishy, gross plastic phones that people bought in droves. Sony has always made a better phone than Samsung. The Lumia line has always been better made than Samsung.
You need people buying them to like them. People do not go into Rogers, Bell, Telus, AT&T, T-Mobile being like, hey, I want that Sony phone that I saw that hilarious Paul Rudd commercial about. They just don't say that.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, because HTC tried the TV, route. They hired Robert Downey Jr. They got him on a bunch of crazy commercials, and that didn't do anything.
No, well, because they didn't make any sense. They weren't about first of all, they weren't well executed. They weren't,
but I'm saying like the difference between a good and bad ad is not going to sell. You're not going to sell millions of more units because of a good and of a bad ad.
But there's a difference between a well-executed ad that's everywhere and is reinforced year after year after year, like Samsung did with the next big thing, and the Apple lineups, and showing how their phone was better than the iPhone, and iPhone people waiting in line for something that they already have is dumb. Like
it takes a multifaceted approach.
It takes time to build mind share. One Robert Downey Jr. ad, or 6 months. That's like every time BlackBerry announced, like, oh, we're gonna go big with this Super Bowl ad, and it's one ad during the Super Bowl that then disappears for a phone that hasn't even been announced. Like they couldn't even announce what U.S. carriers. Like it doesn't. Like it has to. There's network effects to this type of thing.
Sure, but we're also talking about an industry that is super fickle and doesn't understand often their customers. So
yeah,
Samsung, did a great job advertising its Samsung brand with the next big thing and the Apple lineups and whatever. But it also, you know, undercut a lot of its own value by releasing bad phones, you know?
Yep.
So
but it's cleaned that up. Samsung is slowly learning.
Oh, they're totally slowly learning. But I mean, we're not talking about Samsung here. We're talking about everybody else.
Yeah.
We're talking about the companies that are struggling, the companies like HTC, like Microsoft, like Sony, that continue to flounder in the mobile space despite having great products.
Yeah, but you can learn a lot, but then sometimes you're not necessarily in a position to change that. Like we talked about before about like HTC's problems or Sony's problems with getting the right components to be able to make that awesome camera, right? Even though they know they need one, or having the budget and having the revenue because you're a huge company across multiple verticals to be able to like double down for 4 years on making people think of Samsung more than Android. So, you know, you can know what you need to do and not be able to execute it. And, you know, you're also fighting for, you know, whatever the market share of iOS is right now globally, Apple makes every single phone.
They make every single phone and they sell it at a huge margin.
Yeah.
The problem with Android is that there are so many players, and some of them, I mean, look at OnePlus, right? Look at what happened with OnePlus 2. The fact that we are not writing about their bullshit piecemeal rollout. We're just one small Canadian site. Every single time OnePlus talks about their phone, every Android site goes crazy about it, and they write about their, you know, the new spec.
Yeah.
And obviously, I've been looking. The OnePlus 2 is being unveiled on July 27th. And, you know, that kind of guerrilla marketing is often more effective to a certain demographic than a Robert Downey Jr. ad or a next big thing commercial.
Well, right? the returns way better.
Yeah, and returns are way better because they're spending no money.
Yeah.
And it just speaks to the fact that they are acutely aware of who's buying their phone.
But also what they can do to influence that, right? If OnePlus came out with like got a celebrity to do that, that would be the dumbest thing in the world. Usually celebrity endorsements in that way are dumb. Samsung generally does it in the way that actually delivers the most return. And they also establish longer term relationships with people over the course of many years to sync that up.
Except that how many of their celebrity endorsements have, you know, been sent from iPhone, right?
But the broad populace never hears about that. That's something that happens on Twitter for 2 days, and it's because celebrities don't tweet themselves. It's some marketing manager at some agency that owns their social channels that's doing it. Like that stuff happens all the time.
All right. I guess you're right. Well, you know, I can I just say I think this is probably our best podcast ever.
Yeah, we went hard on this podcast. I gotta say I enjoy people participating. I was really anxious to see what vagrants would join us in a Google Hangouts, but pretty good contributions from everyone involved for like a last minute edition.
Say thank you to Candido, Evan, Joel, Shariar.
I just called him Ali. We're really sorry, guys. We're not. Yeah,
we're so white. We're just like the whitest people. Oh my god.
Yeah, well, that's one way of putting it. I think I might write an editorial on why BlackBerry should make the next Nexus.
You should definitely do that. You would be the most popular person of Mobilesyrup.
It'll blow up on Reddit.
It would definitely blow up on Reddit in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. In a don't get hard way. Anything else?
We got 7 minutes left. What else do we have here?
I actually don't want to talk about anything else. Oh, so explain in 45 seconds why T-Mobile's roaming plan is awesome.
Okay, so T-Mobile came out with a new all-in plan this week called Mobile Freedom, and basically what it's about is you pay a single amount per month for a plan that will get unlimited calls, texts, and a certain amount of data. You can spend $75 a month and get unlimited data in the US, but it also roams in Canada and Mexico. And when you're in those countries, you don't pay anything extra per day. Unlike Rogers Roam Like Home, where you pay $5 a day in the US and $10 a day in Europe, this is completely free as part of your monthly bill. And not only do you get to roam on LTE in those places in certain areas, but if you don't have LTE, you get 3G. They don't throttle you as long as you keep within your monthly bandwidth allotment. So
instead of signing up for a plan for the right to get access to a roaming scenario, which you then have to pay for, which is what kind of I had issue with a few weeks ago, they just say, hey, with this plan, you get the dope hotness of roaming.
Right. And Wynn's doing that a little bit with their US roaming plan, but it's not quite as generous because it's only on 3G and you only get a gigabyte per month. But if this influences the Canadian market in any way, which probably won't, but we can all hope, it'll have done its job. So that is T-Mobile's new plan. That is everything from the SyrupCast from this week. My name is Daniel Bader. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you joined us live, we really appreciate all the questions and comments. Please join us next week. We'll be doing this live every week from now on. Douglas, you're awesome. Have a great weekend.
iTunes, high-fiving you, Bader.
That's right. 5 stars.
Shout out to Pan Am Games.
Shout out to Dead Raccoon TO, because I don't know what just happened. And everybody's beautiful. Have a good one.